Welcome back to Animation Teacher. Now, today is kind of a special, um, this episode is a kind of special episode. This one is dedicated to Team Chavo down in Burbank, California. Now, we're working on a project for a client, and um, we've actually developed this rig based on Eric Tran's designs, and I modified this a little bit so that it's different. But the art here, I called him the Pill Build, but he's based off another rig that was developed for Team Chavo in Burbank, like I said. So I just want to give out shout outs to Eric Tran and the Molina twins for their beautiful artwork here. And I basically rigged this character based off of a character that they had designed, and I recreated the torso and removed the mouth for the purposes of this assignment. So what we'll be doing with the pill rig today is we're gonna basically I'm gonna show you how to animate pose to pose using a full body rig. So this is just to build on what we did with the arm assignment and as well as the face planing upper torso assignment. Okay, so what I want to show you guys first is there's this draw here layer that I've created for this sketch layer here, or sketch symbol here. Now I've added something called a transparency node in between. Now if you hold down Alt, you can kind of slide it in there and you can see what that looks like. It basically creates a transparency for whatever you want to see. So that'll come in useful later when we're using our sketch to pose out our drawing. So I'm just going to delete that here and I'll show you where to find it. It's under the node library, and if you can't find the node library, you just press this plus button and just look for the node library here. And then here's the transparency node under the favorites, or you can just type down transparency and it's right there. And you can either connect it like so, or you can simply slide it in by holding Alt. Okay, you can basically attach any kind of node library underneath anything you want and just see what it does. Alright, so what I'll do now is, I'm just going to select my drawing tool here, and we're just going to delete that. And I'm just going to do a quick sketch for you so we can establish our first pose. Now, the first thing you might notice, sometimes when you're designing a character, there's something goes wrong with the color palettes. Now, right now, I have the pill pencil texture selected, and it's got these weird little textures that are placed in. So what you can do is simply go to the main color palette, and it'll bring up flat colors. So you can just go ahead and draw from here. So I'm just going to sketch out something real quick. Alright, so this will be my first pose. And then my second pose, perhaps we'll do a take, maybe. So we'll bend the torso this way to give it some change. Maybe bend the knees. We'll keep the feet where they are. And maybe we'll close the eyes here. we'll put hands on his head. Okay, so we have two drawings. Now I'm going to actually change the color of this. This is kind of hard to see, but you can see my sketch there. I'll just change it to black, so you can just select it. And then I'm going to do that for my first pose as well. Okay, so with the transparency node on, you can actually see that it's kind of got this ghosting effect. Otherwise, you'll have this kind of opaque black, which makes it harder to pose out. Now I put in a rotation here, so it's got a front, 3/4, and a profile. So I want to kind of keep my first keys in my first 3 frames, just in case I need to use it later on. I'm going to start with my 3/4 front pose, and I'm going to basically click and drag to frame 20 while holding Control, and that'll copy my key. I'm going to go ahead and steal my drawings here, and then I'll just lock my layer like so I can pose it out. I want to show you some features of this rig. What's cool about it, I'll just deactivate my sketch by selecting it in the node view and hitting D. What's cool about this rig is you can actually, I'm just going to click and select all of these limbs, and I'll show you the deformer system. So basically we have a deformer on the torso, we've got deformers on the arms and the legs as well. Alright, what makes this rig extra special is it has 2 deformers. In case, for example, you reach for a refrigerator or a car, a flying car, let's say, and then you want your body to kind of flop around there. So you would actually, on that frame, you would switch it to arm number 2, and then that way you can have the arm stay there while your body kind of flies all over the place. Okay. So to reset a deformer, so let's say you went too wild and you moved it up into a weird position and you don't know what to do with it because you've got too many rotation points, then you click on the square box and hit this button up here. It resets the current keyframe back to normal. You can also reset your keyframes by simply if you move something way up top, you can simply select the peg and hit R, and that's going to reset it back to its native position. This 3/4 front's native position is there, so that didn't quite work. But if, for example, we moved this whole head and hit R, it'll pop it right back. Okay, so what I want to show you also is that these deformers, you got to be careful using them, because the legs will do this if you're not too careful with it. It's only because we don't have a kinematic output for these feet. We have it in the arms, so, oh no, we don't have it on this arm. Do we have it on this arm? Okay, we got it on this arm. So I'll show you quickly how to put a kinematic output into your rig. First thing you want to do is click the arm, hover over here, and hit O to locate your arm. You have to make sure focus on mouse enter is set on in your preferences for you to be able to do this. The next thing you're going to do is go into your node library, and it's called Kinematic Output, which is here. You're going to place this in between your deformation chain and your arm, or sorry, your hand here. So once again, you're holding Alt and sliding that in there. So now when you stretch it, it won't deform. So without it, it goes a little wonky. But with it, it maintains its form. So basically, the kinematic output essentially tells whatever is attached underneath to ignore what's happening above with respects to deformation. All right. What we're going to do now is pose it out. Let me just go to my node view, and we're going to go to the top, and I'll select the sketch and hit A to reveal, and we'll start posing this guy out. Now notice that I have my legs kind of tilted this way. I don't plan on actually lifting this guy's feet off the ground, so what I'll do is I'll actually use my drawing substitution number 2. So it's got kind of like an inverse kinematic thing happening here, and you can just start posing out your characters like so. This will keep the feet from moving all over the place. Now you can put a kinematic output on the leg. I chose not to do so. You can if you want, if it really bugs you, but I'm just going to leave it for now. Alright, next up I'm going to move my torso. Now whenever you pose out a character, you want to ensure that you remember more or less the steps that you take in posing your characters. And it's just to say that it's important to develop a particular approach for every time you move your character, a system. So my system is I like to move the big parts first, and then I move the little parts later. You never want to skew the entire master peg because you want to make sure that it, or prevent it from looking flashy. So what I like to do is I like to just move it a little bit or rotate it a little bit, and then I'll skew the individual elements. In this case, the pupil, or sorry, the eyes, eye whites, and then the eyebrows, and then if necessary the pupils, but you really have to do that with the pupils. I've added multiple drawing substitutions for the belt line, so you can get a variety of angles here if you so choose to. So I'm actually going to go with this extreme one, but just going to skew it a little bit. Like so. Okay, and then my arms. Now, for those of you who want to experiment playing with coordinates, you have to pull up this coordinates tab. So just, if you don't already have it, right click in this gray area here and type coordinates, and you'll see that you'll have this translate icon, and this is your X, Y, and Z axis, and you should be able to manipulate Z depth using the Z axis. So right now, I don't need the Z-axis. I already have this on top of my rig here. But let's suppose I wanted to put this hand, for example, behind this wrist and this arm. What I would do is I would select the peg, go here and put 0.001B as in back, and then that'll shoot it back behind the torso. Now if you just punch in 0.001, the F means front, but it'll actually give you the F automatically. Now in this case we don't need any Z depth because it's already rigged to have it set to on top. The next thing we'll do is find the right hand. Another nice thing about this particular rig is we get all these beautiful hands. Once again, thank you to the Molina twins for drawing this library. Now, if there is a hand on the other side that you'd like to place into this side, you can also do that. But for now, let's just use, actually, let's just have a look here. What do we got? That's a nice hand. I wonder if we have it over here. No, we don't. Ah, yeah, we do. Okay, so we'll use this, and we'll flip it upside down or horizontally. So that's R. That's the R button there. Okay. And I'm just going to bring up and down this a little bit. Feels a little too high. Okay, and then this torso feels a little bit too far right, so just push it back. And now for this hand, just gonna bring it up a little bit. Now there is a threshold to these arm deformers, so you want to try not to push that too far in, or otherwise you get this cross section. There are ways to re-rig the character so that doesn't happen, but just for now, if you can avoid just using it, that'd be great. Okay, now there's another drawing instance for this drawing substitution here, and it's the hand that appears on top. So I'm just gonna set that to 0. Actually, I'm gonna set that to 1, so that appears on top of the body. Not too sure if we need that. I just want to see something. Okay, now I'm hitting the brackets next to the P button in order to toggle frame by frame. You can toggle frame by frame your keys as well by clicking the timeline up here and hitting the semicolon and the comma button or the quotation button above. Okay, so let's see if we can find something that might work. That's not going to work. Alright, so I'll actually have to use this for now, and I'm going to set my Z depth to 0. Okay, so there's our first pose, and we're going to go to our next pose, and we're going to hit F6. Okay, so our next pose is actually this. Now, I can either use what I have here, or I can steal this key again. But I'm just going to start working from this pose here. I'm just going to reset that torso, and then I'm going to pose out my legs first. Okay, don't worry about this squash for this week here. You can have it distorted a little bit, or you can toss in the kinematic output if you're bothered by it. Alright, so once again, I'm going to rotate my body here and move it around. Bend it. Okay, you can even, if you wanted, you can skew it as well. And then we're just going to put the face and adjust the belly. Okay, and then we'll move the hands. Now Harmony will remember how many rotation points you take. You can view that here. So watch, if I spin that around, oops, sorry. If I spin this hand around, for example, like that, you can see the rotations there. So you want to avoid doing anything bigger than a 360. And that includes minus 360s as well. Okay, I'm just going to hide my sketch again by selecting D. And I'm going to try to find a proper hand here that will help. Okay, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Yes. Okay, and I'm gonna adjust our feet. Oops. Okay, this needs to be reworked a little bit. Okay. Now, as a general rule, you should be spending more time on posing than actual animation itself. Without strong posing, your animation will suffer. That's a guarantee. Alright, so we got these two poses for now. Just realize I drew this leg way too long. It's okay. There we go. Alright, so we got two poses. Now I'm just gonna close his eyes here and give him a more shocked, surprised expression there. Okay, so now we got our two poses. The next thing we want to do is, for this assignment, we're basically doing pose-to-pose animation. So what I want to do is now create some space by clicking my key and hitting Shift plus. And I will be creating an anticipation pose here, probably there. And then this will also become my overshoot settle. So just for now, I'm going to put my overshoot settle next to each other so I can toggle between the two. So my overshoot is essentially like my settle. I'm just going to hit F6 a bunch of times just to make sure that my keys eat and they work. So for this, I'm just going to add a little bit of a squash here. Okay, I'm just going to compensate. Okay, just moving individual elements. You try not to squash the whole thing too much if you can help it. That way it gives it a nicer squash and stretch, a more believable squash and stretch. Okay. Just gonna rotate that a little bit. Oops. Then we'll move that arm down. Okay, we're doing the same thing, adding the squash and stretch. There we go. Alright, so now we have our rest, and now we do our antic. So our antic is usually just the opposite direction of where we're going. Alright, so it's similar to how we did the overshoot and settle, but this one we push the other direction. But the idea is more or less the same. Just going to push it a little bit more. Now you can also do a lead-in antic for this assignment. That's cool too. But for this one, I'm just going to do a simple, straightforward antic. Oops. Like so. Okay, and then that goes into my overshoot and settle. Alright, let's time this out. So I'm going to click on the overshoot and hit Shift++ a bunch of times. And then I'll start my animation here and I'll end it here. And I'll just loop this so we can see the timing. Alright, so I actually want to just hold this frame for a while. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to hit Shift++ a really bunch of times here. And we'll extend this exposure. And then I'm going to put my animation to start on frame 30. My rest and the antic will happen on 35. Overshoot 39. And then settle on 46. So I'm going to start my tweens here by hitting Control K. And let's play that out. Okay. So I don't really like this antic opposite direction and then down. So I think what I'll do is I'm actually going to create a lead in antic instead. So I'm going to go ahead and start to bend my start to bend my knees a little bit, like so. And then with this torso, I'm going to actually lean it forward and pull it back down. Okay, now the trick is to make it seem like the body is starting to move in advance, or sorry, the legs are starting to move in advance of the body. So it's important to try to keep the pelvis connected, and then you compensate with the rest, like so. Okay, so let's just ditch the keys here. Control L to lose the tween. I just want to see what this looks like. Alright, so just going to readjust the arms here. And just let it drag into there. Alright. That works much better. Alright, so we're going to tween that. And let's have a look again. Great. Alright, so yeah, you might be saying, that's not great, his arms are popping all over the place. Well, that's fine. We can fix those later. The idea is that we get the main action going first. Once we get the main action going first, we can then incorporate our eases. So in this case, we're going to use the set ease to multiple parameters. And to exit out of a frame slowly, you punch in a number on the right hand side. So in this case, I'll hit 65. Okay, and then the speed up into the overshoot can be fast. We'll leave it at 0. But when we get to the overshoot, we want it to kind of slow down. So I'm going to put in 65, and then we can slowly ease out, let's say 20, and then finally settle it in at 80. So let's see our animation with the timing. Okay, so there, it's not bad. So we have the timing here. Once we have the eases going on, the next thing we do is we're going to actually fix the broken pieces. Okay, so if you want, you can turn on the onion skin to check out the arcs, to see if the arcs are working. First of all, we have to take care of the big pieces first. So in this case, it's the torso. Now, something funny is happening from here to this frame here. The sizes are changing dramatically. So what we can do there is we can adjust on the fly to create a better arc, a better flow into this final animation. So I'm just going to curve the arc a little bit there, and you'll see that these turn into white boxes, and that's just to indicate that there's been a change somewhere in the grouping. Okay, so it's this one pose here that we're going to have to cheat the transition to, and then when we get to this, That'll smooth things out a little bit better. Okay, and now we'll fix the eyes. So the eyes go a little wonky. So what I'll do is I'm going to start to close the eyes around here. Okay, now the trick is when you're doing stuff like this, the trick is to start to lower the pupils as well before the eyes completely close. So for this next one, we're going to close it entirely. And we're going to adjust the eyes, the eyebrows, and the pelvis. So we can just slowly bring it back. Okay, so around here, we can bring it back. Okay, so the idea is pretty consistent all the way across. Once you figure out your main keys, you're going to then try to time it out, and then after you time it out, all you do is set the ease, and then once you set the ease, then it's just about making sure you fix any pops and discrepancies, right? Oops. So right now, just fixing the face. I just want to see how it transitions down. So there's a change that happens there. I just want to make sure I can capture that transition nicely. Oops. Okay, you can also turn on the onion skin so you can smooth out the action even more. Okay. Then what I like to do is I like to also start to bring down the eyebrows. So it's kind of like dragging against or with the body here with a little bit of a delay, right? And then it'll be also the first one to go back up when the eyes open up. But in this case, I think we're going to keep the eyes down. So let's put this these eyebrows back down here. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so we'll just adjust the animation or the posing a little bit here. And then next up, we're going to fix our hands. Now, it's here where things start to flip out of control. So all you do is locate the hand in the timeline. There it is, right? And then you're just going to remove the tweens. That's it, right? So now all you do is you're going to go take the last key or the next key, and you're going to slide it back one by holding Control, and you're going to copy that key. So what that does is it allows you a key to transition into. So for example, this will be my key before it hits into that pose there. Okay. Now I just noticed that this arm is too far back, so I'll adjust it like so. Okay, but now we know that that arm is too far back. And for these ones here, you can literally just do frame by frame. So I'm going to bring this arm up. I'm going to create a drag using one of these many beautiful hands. So maybe this one. I'll flip the symbol by hitting 4. Okay, and I'm going to create an artificial drag here. by pinching the arms here. And then this is the transition. So the transitions sometimes are crazier than the keys, because this is where the magic happens in animation. You start to do weird looking things like that for a transition. You can do the proper breakdown sometimes also, but sometimes, just sometimes, a nice little effect like this can trick the eye into thinking that transition is pretty darn smooth. Okay, so just going to play that for you. Cool, eh? Alright, so the next thing is we're going to fix this arm. Now this one, there's a lot of stuff hidden, so you can kind of cheat that, but I'm just going to do it the same way here. I'm going to take this arm key, and then I'm going to copy it in the previous frame and use this as the in-between to transition into that. And then on this one here, I'm just going to key it and start to animate it out. Once again, create a little bit of a drag. And then for this frame here, this is the in-between before it snaps into this pose here. So you can get a little bit creative of how you want to transition the two. And then it goes in like that. Now lastly, we'll fix the legs here. Now the legs isn't so bad, it's mostly just this pose here that we have to fix, right? So that's not so bad at all. Now you might be saying, well, that looks okay, but can we add some delay to this? And yes, you can. So if you want to do some more delay on this, this is the arms is where you would do it. So simply click the two arms here and hit Shift plus a couple of times. You just need 2 frames, and you're going to hit Command K. That's going to create, oh, forgot to do it there. Okay, it's supposed to create a slight tween drag, but that's fine. Let's just remove the tweens here, Command or Control L, and we'll just do it manually here, just because we had a change in drawing substitution and we had to flip it. So I believe we use that hand. Okay, and then we can start to pull the hand out here and create that artificial drag. Or you might even want this artificial drag to happen in the previous key, and you might want a breakdown instead on these two here. So I copied these 2 keys here, and I'm going to use this opportunity, this extra frame, to do an in-between to see if that will help the transition a little bit better. I'm sure it will. I'm just going to hit R to reset this here. It's getting a little too wonky for my liking. Okay. And then we'll use maybe that hand. Yeah. Okay. There we go. So we can create more of a drag here and there. And then for the other hand, maybe we delay it like so. And let's see what that looks like. Alright, so we can even delay it even one more and make sure our arms are connected. Okay, I'm going to delay it from here to here. Shift plus. Okay, and I'm going to hit F6 and create a little bit of a drag. Alright, so what I'm looking for here is just an arc. So if you turn on your onion skin, you see the hand arcing around. So that we want that nice little arc to happen. And same for this hand here. I'm trying to create an artificial drag that curves this hand to this hand before it slaps down into the final position. So let's see how that plays out. Alright, so we have our offset animation there as well. So that's basically it for one pose. What I like you to do is do 4 poses. So we start with our dynamic first resting position. You antic, overshoot, and settle into your second position. And from this position, you want to transition into another pose. That'll be 3. And then from the third pose, you do another antic, overshoot, and settle to go into your final position. So that's 4 poses for each one of those. Now, before I go, I wanted to show you guys how to create artwork. So if you needed, for example, one of these hands, I'll just go to my neutral position here. If you wanted to transition, let's say, hand number 2 over to this side, because there is no hand number 2 right now that matches, simply use the black selection tool, make sure you're on the right layer of the drawing. It's in the line art layer for the hand. With the black arrow selected, you're going to hit Control A, selecting all, and Control C to copy. Then you're going to go on to your hand and hit Alt Shift Alt Shift D. Is it Alt Shift D? That's to duplicate. Alt Shift R to create an empty drawing, and I'll give you an empty drawing here. Then, while you're still in the camera, you can hit paste. Actually, sorry, you need this black arrow tool, and then you can paste it. It's going to place it right where you copied it, so just keep that in mind. What you're going to do next is you're going to use the Operation Flip Vertical button, and then click and drag that over to your next hand. You want to usually try to do these copy and paste pieces of art in your default pose, because when you try to do that in something that's already posed out, so for example, if I select all, Control A, and then Control C to copy, and I try to place it in here, so Alt Shift R, or sorry, Alt Control R, Alt Shift R? What was that? Create empty drawing. Alt Shift R, yep, to create an empty drawing, and you hit the black arrow tool. And now watch what happens when I paste it. It'll paste it back here, but when I move it, oh, it's working now. Okay, well, there you go. And I think that's because we activated the kinematic output. So that's another advantage, I guess, to have the kinematic output. Let me just hit undo a bunch of times. I'll show you with the legs. So Control A, copy, and then we'll go to this one, drawing, create empty drawing, black arrow tool, Control V, and paste. Now watch what happens when I try to move it around here. It's being affected by the deformer. So even when I paste it, it's like Control V. Even when I paste it, it's being already affected by the deformer. So when I move this deformer here, for example, like that, and I go in um, and I paste it. It's basically, the idea is with the kinematic output, it's not going to paste it into the proper place. So you'll want to do it in the default position here. Alright, so that does it. I hope that last part didn't quite confuse you. But as a fail-safe, just make sure that you're copy and pasting art in this original view, just to prevent any weird happenings. Now, if you need a refresher on basic rigging of a deformer, you can check out the arm arm animation video. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next week, and I hope this video has been super helpful. Now the leg disappears, so let's search that, and there's a drawing instance change here. So whenever that happens, just locate and place in the proper drawing again. Cool. All right, I look forward to helping you problem solve as we continue on. Next week, we're going to be doing a new rig, and it's basically going to be similar to the Franco rig. It might be the Franco rig, but we'll try something that will challenge your ability to pose out upper torso and lower torso animation. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.